中產階級一詞係喺18世紀工業革命時代誕生，最先係喺《Scheme to Prevent Running Irish Wolves to France》一書裏面出現。工業革命時代，科技開始進步，西方由單純嘅農業社會變成咗工業社會，產能嘅提升令社會物質富裕起嚟，商業活動增加，因此工業技術人員及受教育嘅白領階層興起，成為農民及藍領工人之上嘅中產階級。因此，自美國立國以嚟，承接住工業革命嘅成果，與此同時，亦都避開咗2次世界大戰嘅摧殘。美國得以興起成為先進嘅國家，亦都擁有最多嘅中產階級，成為工業創新科技嘅強國。數十年嚟，美國人重複住呢個美國夢，孩子希望努力讀書，考上大學，畢業後尋找一份優越嘅工作，成為中產階層嘅一份子。可是近10年卻係中產階層失落嘅10年。2001年至2010年，自2次世界大戰以嚟，首次中產階級嘅收入下跌，並且中產階級嘅數量亦都開始下滑。
It has become much harder to maintain a middle-class standard of living.
The study of middle-class Americans, like New Jersey garage owner John O'Connor, looked at households with incomes ranging from $39,000 to $118,000.
We don't dine out. We don't go to the movies the way we used to, things like that. So, like everybody, I think we've become more frugal.
Between 2000 and 2010, median middle-class wealth dropped 28%, from about $130,000 to $93,000. Lower real estate values played a big part. 42% said their financial situation is worse now than before the Great Recession. Paul Taylor co-authored the report.
This is the first decade in the post-World War II era where the middle class, indeed all families, have actually less income at the end of the decade than they had at the beginning of the decade.
The study also found the percentage of Americans in the middle class fell from 61% in 1971 to 51% now.
究其主因係最富有嘅1%希望成為更富有嘅一群。因住科技、交通、互聯網發展，大企業可以將大部分嘅工作轉移到其他國家。此舉雖然可以令企業嘅盈利增加，但同時亦都會使中產階級職位下跌，因而造成中產階級消失嘅 M 型社會。再者，最富有嘅1%甚至能夠控制政府，讓佢哋得盡所有嘅好處。
Let's talk about a little thing called income equality. Back in the good old days, the CEOs earned maybe 15 to 20 times more than their workers. Today, they're making an average of 300 times more. This is crazy, you say. How could they have gotten away with this? Well, it certainly wasn't by putting America's interests first. One way the big corporations started earning more money was by eliminating jobs in the U.S. and taking them overseas. CEOs complained that American wages were too high, so they moved the jobs to countries with no minimum wage or no rules to protect worker safety or the environment. The CEOs also worked hard to give unions a bad name. It's easy to forget that a lot of the rights we take for granted, like weekends and 40-hour work weeks, were won by the unions. But despite that crucial legacy, the number of union members has dropped off dramatically. So now when CEOs want to force lower wages, cut benefits, ship more jobs overseas, and give themselves huge raises, there's no one there to fight back. It turns out that without the collective bargaining power of unions, we all just get easier and easier to screw. Taxes! And what about taxes? In the days of Leave It to Beaver, the idea that the very rich could afford to pay more in taxes than the middle class was accepted on a bipartisan level. Presidents from Eisenhower to Nixon believed in progressive taxation as a matter of simple equity and justice. But taxes for the richest Americans have come down at a continuous clip since the 1960s, which would be fine, except that the middle class has been left to pick up the tab. Are you starting to recognize a trend here? That's right. It turns out there's a reason the rich get richer, mainly because they're not paying their fair share. For instance, While a hedge fund manager is making millions, he's likely paying a lower tax rate than his secretary who's making thousands. And major companies like ExxonMobil, BP, KPMG, and hundreds of others make billions each quarter, but somehow don't end up with any tax liability at the end of the year. How do they accomplish this? By sending high-priced lobbyists to Washington, D.C. to help rewrite the tax code. Those crafty devils. Look, Wall Street is all about investments, and probably one of the most lucrative investments they've ever made has been in Washington, D.C. Over $1 million a day on lobbying alone. And that investment in the form of these lobbyists has been really productive.
但係真正給予中產階級致命一擊嘅，卻係 Freemason 銀行家，因為教育帶嚟爬上社會上層嘅機會，同時亦都帶嚟債務。同香港情況相似，當年青人畢業之後，佢哋以置業嚟累積財富，因此除咗償還學生貸款以外，亦都要償還按揭供款。喺入不敷支嘅情況下，佢哋最終成為咗債務嘅奴隸，每一個月嘅薪水只係夠當月嘅開支，一旦失業，最終亦要流落街頭。
The U.S. was once home to the picture-perfect American dream. A house, a car, and a job symbolized the middle class as the core of a prosperous country. Yet, for an increasing amount of Americans, some or all of these are now out of reach.
This country was founded on the ideals of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. How can you be happy if you can't pay your rent? How is this American in any way, shape, or form?
The new America is littered with millions of homes lost and abandoned, with the unemployed officially at over 13 million still queuing to get a job. Does this mean the middle class is disappearing in the U.S.?
There have been 4 pillars that supported the American middle class. The chance to retire, the chance to send your kids to higher education, graduate school, university, the chance to work and afford a comfortable standard of living, and access to medical care. And if we look, all 4 of these pillars are chipped, cracked, or swaying.
Today, over 60% of Americans say they typically live paycheck to paycheck, leaving little for college fees, mortgage payments, or retirement. The U.S. is increasingly being divided into rich and poor, with the traditionally large center, the middle class, being squeezed out. The bottom 50% of earners today own less than 1% of the country's wealth. Finding work on average takes 8.5 months now, and with 6 Americans vying for each job, the prospects for the country's youth look dim. Melanie Samuels runs a food pantry in New York. She says the face of hunger in America has drastically changed.
Now we're seeing people that do have an education, used to have decent jobs, now online, coming in teary-eyed, crying. They never thought this would happen to them.
Some 40% of the 43 million food stamp recipients today are working Americans, and every 5th child now lives below the poverty line. America grew prosperous on the belief that the next generation of workers would live better than the first. But nowadays, the outlook for the future is anything but optimistic.
We're going to see more and more of a squeeze, more people on food stamps, more people at food kitchens, and more malnourished and hungry children in this country, no question.
As the foundation of the middle class continues to crumble, concerns are growing that the heart of the American dream could stop beating altogether. And if the middle class collapses, the face of America in the 21st century could become one this country has never seen before.
由於中產階級減少，斷供房屋增加，導致房地產泡沫爆破，中產階級損失累積嘅財富。由2009年至今，已經有250萬間房屋因斷供被銀行收回。粉碎嘅美國夢最終以血案收場。
More than 2.5 million houses in the United States have been repossessed by banks since the economic crisis struck the country. But the impact isn't only financial. Many forced out of their homes are taking drastic measures, some even choosing to take their own lives when faced with eviction.
Last year, the town's foreclosure rate was the 3rd highest in the country, with 1 in every 19 properties repossessed by the banks. The entire region is ravaged by unemployment and budget cuts, and it's a story being repeated nationwide with equally bloody consequences. In Phoenix, a man opened fire on police when he refused to leave his house. In Ohio, an old married couple killed themselves when faced with eviction, while in Florida, a man was gunned down by police after he set his recently foreclosed townhouse on fire. These death by foreclosure killings have been going on quietly around the country ever since the financial crisis threatened to pull the rug from those only surviving on credit.
更甚者，為咗讓 Freemason 銀行家賺取更多嘅利潤，面對經濟危機嘅時候，美國政府選擇開動印鈔機以救助銀行家之餘，美元貶值對中產階級嚟講更加係雪上加霜。共和黨參選人 Ron Paul 亦都曾經喺電視辯論裏面斥責政府以消滅中產嘅方式，讓富有嘅人變得更加富有。呢個正係 Freemason 統治者樂於睇到嘅結局。
But middle class is suffering, but not only because we bail out the rich and dump on the poor and they lose their jobs and they lose their houses, but there's a characteristic about monetary policy. When a country destroys its currency, it transfers wealth from the middle class to the wealthy. And this is what you're seeing today, the elimination of the middle class. And it's going to get a lot worse unless we address the subject overspending, overborrowing, and printing too much money and understanding the business cycle.
但係咧，其實我哋睇到咧，自從呢個列根啦，一路講緊大小布殊啦，跟住我哋講緊嘅克林頓啦，跟住奧巴馬咧，其實佢哋用嘅方法都係毀滅美國嘅中產階級嘅，其實係非常之唔 make sense 嘅。美國喺歷史上面咧，可以話係一個製造最多優質產品嘅地方，日本係製造最多化學產品嘅地方啦，係咪？連個面都化學過型嘅，係咪？咁跟住佢哋嗰啲電器啊，全部都比人更加化學嘅，係咪？即係惡意淘汰佢哋做鼻祖噶嘛。但係美國嗰陣時就唔係嘅，美國係製造非常之多好嘅來佬嘢，係咪？但係咧，克林頓呢一批嘅總統咧，就竟然將所有呢一啲佢哋能夠生產呢啲工廠咧，逼到佢哋死為止。OK， 搞到佢哋所有美國能夠成為全世界製造最多中產階級嘅國家咧，佢哋工作嘅環境咧完全滅絕晒。OK， 即係等於你好似想清晒啲曱甴啊、蚊蟲啊，你就清晒垃圾一樣，佢就清晒佢哋嘅生計。所以導致中產階級嘅工作咧，根本大家互相鬥爭。而家成日話失業率咧，其實就係由克林頓啊，先係搞一啲叫做所謂環保啊，跟住地球暖化，一路將你嘅工廠扼殺晒咧，就全部工廠去晒墨西哥啊，全部工廠走晒去中國啊，而家連中國嘅工廠都走埋去印度啊，咁樣搞到 OK， 咁所以變咗其實咧中產階級咧，其實就係最悲慘嘅一班。而事實上，但係中產階級亦係點解佢哋咁憎咧？因為喺美國中產階級係最多基督徒嘅 ，OK 係最多嘅嚇。咁而呢一班咧，其實按住 Web Up 咁講嘅話咧，咁係一件好大嘅悲劇。咁有時而家佢講 QE1 啊、QE2 啊、QE3 啊，即係量化寬鬆嘅呢個方法咧，就更加毀滅咗佢哋啦嚇。因為呢個方法係使到有錢佬更有錢，窮人就更窮，中產階級就被滅絕嚇呢種嘅方法。咁所以變咗呢個量化寬鬆可以話係擺到明啦，係扼殺咗中產階級嘅工作㗎。因為點解？因為所謂量化寬鬆咧，佢第一次做咗出嚟，導致美國嘅國債再多，但係佢哋嗰個嘅失業率咧有升冇減，啲物價有升冇減。好啦，跟住量化寬鬆第二次出嚟，美國國債再大，咁跟住咧一樣。佢哋嘅失業率有升冇減，佢哋嗰個嘅物價指數有升冇減，更多人咧就變咗冇屋住，因為啲屋貴晒啦嘛，啲屋啲債務幾何級數咁上啦。好啦，佢嫌佢哋未死得夠絕，佢係而家無限嘅量化寬鬆。OK， 咁所以你能夠想象嘅失業率咧就會更加飆升啦，而並且咧啲物價咧就會再次飆升噶啦，因為呢個方法會導致美金貶值嘅。OK， 簡單嚟講，因為你話咩叫量化寬鬆啊？